Hello and welcome back to this week's Bible study. This week we're going to be talking about the actual creation of the tabernacle, and we spoke in a couple of chapters before on how God gave the Israelites the plans for making the tabernacle, which is the tent of meeting, which is a place where he wants people to come to fellowship with him. We also understand from the tabernacle that it was built according to God's way, which he started from the inside out. But the way that it's going to be built, the way that man builds, is always he starts from the outside in. And that's kind of a reference to how our life changes when we connect and accept Jesus Christ into our life. We connect with him because we are outside of the realm, and we connect with him to reach the spiritual place of God, and then he changes us from the inside. And that's what Jesus does. He changes us slowly, and it's a process, and it takes time. And yes, you're going to be confused about many things, and yes, you're going to make mistakes, and yes, you're not perfect. But you need to have faith and continue to trust in Jesus, and he will guide you, and God will protect you along the way if you continue to obey in him. Before we get into the chapter today, I did write some notes here about something that I wanted to mention. So it looks like we're probably going to go into, we only got this week and next week left for to finish off the book of Exodus, but Leviticus is a book that is coming up next, and there's a lot of stuff in there about, sacrifice and the process for sacrifices, and I really don't want to get into none of that because we don't need to, but there are some places in Leviticus that we should read. So I will try to see how I can work those in so that we can just focus on the main parts of Leviticus that really represents what God wants for us in our life even today, because a lot of these laws don't go away. They're still in effect. Even though we have grace, we still have to follow God's laws. And one of the things in Leviticus 26, when I was going over it, it says that, the blessings, it's important because the blessings come from the Lord when we obey. When we don't obey, there are certain curses that befall us, and that's a result of the disobedience to his laws. So in my opinion, I do still think that the laws are important, and you will feel them in your moral spirit. If you're morally spiritual, you will feel that they are still necessary, many of the laws nowadays. So anyway, with that said, let's get to chapter 36 in Exodus. And we'll start here with verse number 1. Then wrought Bezaleel and Aholiab and every wise-hearted man in whom the Lord put wisdom and understanding to know how to work all manner of work for the service of the sanctuary, according to all that the Lord had commanded. And Moses called Bezaleel and Aholiab and every wise-hearted man in whose heart the Lord had put wisdom, even every one whose heart stirred him up to come unto the work to do it. So from my notes here on this verse number 2, I have here that now it was really actually time to do the work that was from the planning and all the preparation and all of that. Whosever heart was lifted to help in doing the service, now it was the time to actually get the work done. And it was kind of a form of worship to God. Even though they had willing hearts, especially since last week we talked about how they had disobeyed God, but now they realized that they missed the immediate presence of God that they had in the desert, in the wilderness. So now their hearts were really willing and to show God that they were sorry for what they had done to make him kind of step away a bit. Verse number 3, and they received of Moses all the offering which the children of Israel had brought for the work of the service of the sanctuary to make it withal. And they brought yet unto him free offerings for every morning. Verse number 4, and all the wise men that wrought all the work of the sanctuary came every man from his work which they made. Okay, from my notes I wrote that what we're seeing here is that our money and our time forms our contribution, and your time is also represented and stored away with the value of the money of your work is going to be earned. So when the time comes to give a contribution, you are giving money, you're giving work that is stored away. So some people, what I'm trying to say is some people gave money and some people didn't give money, they gave of the work. So they were equally valued because your time is your work, and that's what they were putting in. When people say that you only give your tithe with money, in my opinion, also, if you are giving service of your time to a church or something, that's also considered some type of compensation, is your time that you're giving them. There's different ways to give to God. It's not, what I'm trying to say is not always money that you can give to God. You can give him with your time dedicated in service to do things for his ministry and for people, because you want to, not because you have to, not because it's going to buy you grace, not because it's going to buy you favor or blessing. You do it because you want to do it, because you want to save one more soul to go to eternity. That's what it's about. 5, and they spake unto Moses, saying, the people bring much more than enough for the service of the work, which the Lord commanded to make. So let's talk here about this one a little bit. Okay, so the people have now been, restrained from bringing because they have such wonderful, willing hearts. They gave so much. And the people were so eager and they were so moved by what they were going to do that in their community, that they were exceedingly generous with their gifts. So it is thought that perhaps one of the reasons that Moses stopped the receiving of things is because the Sabbath was coming and you couldn't bring none of that into the Sabbath. But then some people say, well, why didn't they continue afterwards? So this is a lesson for us to understand when when there is enough. And usually nowadays, it would be hard to believe that a nonprofit organization would turn away excess donations and they would turn away gifts. So from this verse, it is believed that God's wanting was specific about what he wanted, and there weren't going to be any omissions and there weren't going to be any additions. So there wasn't more or there were less. It was exactly what he needed, and it was going to be built the way God said, with the things that he wanted. So the lesson here is that we learned that God didn't want them to amass assets and to spend goodwill for their own sake, like just keep bringing stuff just so that you can look better. You have to be careful, because at that point, people may want others to notice that they're giving more. And that is also not a good thing. So it was enough for everybody to give at the time that they gave. And they didn't want people to take advantage of other people's generosity simply because it existed. Because some religious institutions now do prey off of people's kindness, and then they take and invest in frivolity, and it's a sick kind of abuse. So in my opinion, I think that God wanted to make sure there was no idolatry in this, That's why it had to be done his way. It couldn't be done any more than that way, because if one person puts, their idea like, okay, we got extra money, now let's make like this huge steeple that rises up 18 feet, that could have been construed as idolatry, and that person could have revered because of their wonderful idea or whatever. So, and I've seen churches, and I was appalled. When I lived in Fort Lauderdale, there was a church that I was going to, and they had a nice steeple, the point. And they decided they needed more money for people, more donations, so they can build one that was longer and taller and higher. And they did, because they got the money for that. And I thought that was pointless and useless, because they didn't need the money for that. That money should have gone to something else. But there you go. That's what happens in today's world. Anyway, so contrary to what we read in the Bible, isn't it? Many things that we see in the world, once we read the Bible, we see that they're unjust and they're wrong. Verse number 6, and Moses gave commandments, and they caused it to be proclaimed throughout the camp, saying, let neither man nor woman make any more work for the offering of the sanctuary. So the people were restrained from bringing. Verse number 7, for the stuff they had was sufficient for all the work to make it, and too much. Verse number 8, and every wise-hearted man among them that wrought the work of the tabernacle made 10 curtains of fine twined linen, and blue and purple and scarlet, with cherubims of cunning work made he them. So for my notes, I wrote that spinning and weaving to make cloth, it took a long time. If you owned more than 2 or 3 changes of clothing, you were considered wealthy at that time. So as you can see, this tabernacle was filled with tremendous community involvement, where everybody was willing to participate. Verse number 9, the length of one curtain was 28 cubits, and the breadth of one curtain 4 cubits. The curtains were all of one size. Verse 10, and he coupled the 5 curtains one onto another, and the other 5 curtains he coupled one onto another. And he made loops of blue on the edge of one curtain from the selvage and the coupling. Likewise, he made in the uttermost side of another curtain in the coupling of the second. 50 loops made he in one curtain, and 50 loops made he in the edge of the curtain, which was in the coupling of the second. The loops held one curtain to another. And he made 50 taches of gold, and he coupled the curtains one unto another with the taches, so it became one tabernacle. And he made curtains of goat's hair for the tent over the tabernacle. 11 curtains he made them. The length of one curtain was 30 cubits, and 4 cubits was the breadth of one curtain. The 11 curtains were of one size. And he coupled 5 curtains by themselves and 6 curtains by themselves. Verse number 17, and he made 50 loops upon the uttermost edge of the curtain in the coupling, and 50 loops made he upon the edge of the curtain which coupleth the second. And he made 50 taches of brass to couple the tent together, that it might be one. And he made a covering for the tent of ram skins dyed red, and a covering of badger skins above that. And he made boards for the tabernacle of shittim wood standing up. By the way, I talked about a lot of these items when a couple of chapters back. So if you haven't watched that video, I explained what a lot of these items were when they were going through the planning phase. So you may want to go back there and read that. Verse number 20, and he made boards for the tabernacle of shittim wood standing up. The length of a board was 10 cubits, and the breadth of a board 1 cubit and a half. 22, and board had 2 tenons equally distant one from another. Thus did he make for all the boards of the tabernacle. And he made boards for the tabernacle, 20 boards for the south side southward, and 40 sockets of silver he made under the 20 boards, 2 sockets under one board for his 2 tenons, and 2 sockets under another board for his 2 tenons. And for the other side of the tabernacle, which is toward the north corner, he made 20 boards. Verse 26, and there are 40 sockets of silver, 2 sockets under one board, and 2 sockets under another board. And for the sides of the tabernacle westward, he made 6 boards. You can see that all of this was planned by God, and he's so meticulous in every little thing, like 50 loops, and it has to be like this, and it has to be like that. So this was perfection. Verse 28, and 2 boards made he for the corners of the tabernacle in the 2 sides, and they were coupled beneath and coupled together at the head thereof to 1 ring. Thus he did to both of them in both the corners. And there were 8 boards, and their sockets were 16 sockets of silver, under every board 2 sockets. Verse 31, and he made bars of shittim wood, 5 for the boards of the one side of the tabernacle, and 5 bars for the boards of the other side of the tabernacle, and 5 bars for the boards of the tabernacle for the sides westward. And he made the middle bar to shoot through the boards from the one end to the other. And he overlaid the boards with gold, and made their rings of gold to be places for the bars, and overlaid the bars with gold. Verse 35, and he made a veil of blue and purple and scarlet and fine twined linen with cherubims, made he it of cunning work. So if you didn't know, the cherubims were mighty angels, and those were important here. And he made thereunto 4 pillars of shittim wood, and overlaid them with gold. Their hooks were of gold, and he cast for them 4 sockets of silver. And he made a hanging for the tabernacle door of blue and purple and scarlet and fine twined linen of needlework. And the 5 pillars of it with their hooks, and he overlaid their chapiters and their fillets with gold, but their 5 sockets were of brass. Verse 37, and Bazil made the ark of shittim wood. 2 cubits and a half was the length of it, and a cubit and a half of the breadth of it, and a cubit and a half of the height of it. So from my notes, I wrote that the Ark of the Covenant was built to hold the 10 Commandments, which symbolized God's covenant with the people. So obviously, the 10 Commandments, you had to obey them. If not, then God covenant was not going to be in your life, obviously, right? So 2 gold cherubims were placed on top of this, and this was one of Israel's most sacred objects. Once per year, the high priest entered the most high place to sprinkle blood on the top of the ark, called the atonement cover, to atone for the sins of the entire nation. Bazil made the ark of shittim wood. 2 cubits and a half was the length of it, and a cubit and a half of the breadth of it, and a cubit and a half of the height of it. Verse number 2, and he overlaid it with pure gold within and without, and made a crown of gold to it round about. And he cast for it 4 rings of gold to be set by the 4 corners of it, even 2 rings upon the one side of it, and 2 rings upon the other side of it. Verse number 4, and he made staves of shittim wood, and overlaid them with gold. And he put the staves into the rings by the sides of the ark to bear the ark. And he made the mercy seat of pure gold. 2 cubits and a half was the length thereof, and the cubit and a half of the breadth thereof. Verse number 7, and he made 2 cherubims of gold beaten out of one piece, made he them on the 2 ends of the mercy seat. 1 cherubim on this end on the side, and another cherubim on the other end on that side. Out of the mercy seat made he the cherubims on the 2 ends thereof. And the cherubim spread out their wings on high, and covered with their wings over the mercy seat, with their faces one to another, even to the mercy seat were the faces of the cherubims. So obviously these angels were very important here. And he made the table of shittim wood. 2 cubits was the length thereof, and a cubit the breadth thereof, and a cubit and a half the height thereof. And he overlaid it with pure gold, and made thereunto a crown of gold round about. Also he made thereunto a border of an handbreadth round about, and made a crown of gold for the border thereof round about. And he cast for it 4 rings of gold, and put the rings upon the 4 corners that were in the 4 feet thereof. Over against the border were the rings, the places for the staves to bear the table. And he made the staves of shittim wood, and overlaid them with gold to bear the table. And he made the vessels which were upon the table, his dishes and his spoons and his bowls and his covers, to cover withal of pure gold. Verse number 17, and he made the candlestick of pure gold of beaten work. Made he the candlestick, his shaft, and his branch, his bowls, his knobs, and his flowers were of the same. Verse number 18, and 6 branches going out of the sides thereof, 3 branches of the candlestick out of the one side thereof, and 3 branches of the candlestick out of the other side thereof. 3 bowls made after the fashion of almonds in one branch, a knop and a flower, and 3 bowls made like almonds in another branch, a knot and a flower. So throughout the 6 branches going out of the candlestick. So you can see there was engraving also that was done here. There's a lot of work that's involved here. So it shows you that God likes beautiful things, and certain things represent things that were important to him to be placed here. And in the candlestick were 4 bowls made like almonds, his knops and his flowers. And a knot under 2 branches of the same, and a knot under the 2 branches of the same, and a knot under the 2 branches of the same, according to the 6 branches going out of it. Their knops and their branches were of the same. All of it was one beaten work of pure gold. And he made his 7 lamps, and his snuffers, and his snuff dishes of pure gold. Of a talent of pure gold made he it, and all the vessels thereof. And he made the incense altar of shittim wood. The length of it was a cubit, and the breadth of it a cubit. It was 62 cubits was the height of it. The horns thereof were of the same. And he overlaid it with pure gold, both the top of it and the sides thereof round about. And the horns of it also he made unto it a crown of gold round about. And he made 2 rings of gold for it under the crown thereof by the 2 corners of it upon the 2 sides thereof, to be places for the staves to bear it withal. And he made the staves of shittim wood and overlaid them with gold. And he made the holy anointing oil and the pure incense of sweet spices according to the work of the apothecary. Let's go now to chapter 38. And he made the altar of burnt offering of shittim wood. 5 cubits was the length thereof, and 5 cubits the breadth thereof. It was 4 square, and 3 cubits the height thereof. And he made the horns thereof on the 4 corners of it. The horns thereof were of the same, and he overlaid it with brass. And he made all the vessels of the altar, the pots and the shovels and the basins, and the flesh hooks and the fire pans. All the vessels thereof made he of brass. And he made for the altar a brazen grate of network under the compass thereof beneath unto the midst of it. And he cast 4 rings for the 4 ends of the grate of brass to be places for the staves. Verse number 6, and he made the staves of shittim wood and overlaid them with brass. And he put the staves into the rings on the sides of the altar to bear it withal. He made the altar hollow with boards. Verse number 8, and he made the laver of brass, and the foot of it of brass, of the looking glass of the women assembling, which assembled at the door of the tabernacle of the congregation. So let's talk here, this chapter here. So in this verse number 8, on my notes I wrote that this basin, this wash basin in the courtyard, was made of copper, and it was made from the mirrors of the women who served at the entrance of the tent meeting. So these women, we don't know what happened, but they make later on another appearance in the Bible in a very less positive way. In Samuel chapter 2, the sons of the high priest Eli abused their power in all sorts of ways, including lying with the women who served at the entrance of the tent of meeting. And you will find that in chapter 2, verse 22. So when we get there, we will read about that. Verse number 9, and he made the court on the south side, southward. The hangings of the court were of fine twined linen and 100 cubits. Number 10, their pillars were 20, and their brassen sockets 20. The hooks of the pillars and their fillets were of silver. And for the north side, the hangings were in 100 cubits. Their pillars were 20, and their sockets of brass 20. The hooks of the pillars and their fillets of silver. Verse 12, and for the west side were hangings of 50 cubits, their pillars 10, and their sockets 10, the hooks of the pillars and their fillets of silver. And for the east side, eastward 50 cubits. The hanging of the one side of the gate were 15 cubits, their pillars 3, and their sockets 3. And for the other side of the court gate on this hand and that hand were hangings of 15 cubits, their pillars 3, and their sockets 3. All the hangings of the court round about were of fine twined linen. 17. And the sockets for the pillars were of brass, the hooks of the pillars and their fillets of silver, and the overlaying of their chapters of silver, and all the pillars of the court were filled with silver. And the hanging for the gate of the court was needlework of blue and purple and scarlet, and fine twined linen, and 20 cubits was the length, and the height and the breadth was 5 cubits, answerable to the hangings of the court. Verse number 19, and their pillars were 4, and their sockets of brass 4, their hooks of silver, and the overlaying of their chapiters, and their fillets of silver. Verse number 20, and all the pins of the tabernacle and of the court round about were of brass. Verse 21, this is the sum of the tabernacle, even of the tabernacle of testimony, as it was counted according to the commandment of Moses, for the service of the Levites by the hand of Ithamar, son to Aaron the priest. So let's talk about this here. In this verse 21, and from my notes I wrote that Ithamar oversaw the Levites who had the responsibility of managing all of the resources that were provided. And these resources in present day value today for the material used in the tabernacle would be more than $13 million worth of materials if it was today. And the weight combined would be about 19,000 pounds. It was a really significant process that took community effort, but they had to have the right people managing all of these things, and they had to manage them wisely. Some people wonder about how Israelites could have gotten like all of these items, but if you remember back in Exodus, I think it was in 12, we reminded that the children of Israel, when they left Egypt, they left with a lot of resources because the Egyptians willingly, they wanted them out, they willingly gave them things and money and gold and all of this stuff in back wages for all their years of slavery when they left. You remember that. So Moses basically was laying out the steps, but Ithamar was the one that supervised the project. And Moses' job was to motivate others to use their God-given talents and abilities for the building of this. And what we can learn from this, to let God use your gifts by seeking opportunities in the areas that you are gifted in. And a lot of us seem to not do that when we get older. Verse number 22, and Bezaleel, the son of Uri, the son of Ur, of the tribe of Judah, made all that the Lord commanded Moses. And with him was Aholiab, son of Ahisamach, of the tribe of Dan, an engraver and a cunning workman, and an embroiderer in blue and in purple and in scarlet, and in fine linen. Verse 24, and all the gold that was occupied for the work, and all the work of the holy place, even the gold of the offering, was 29 talents and 730 shekels, after the shekel of the sanctuary. From my notes, you can see that they needed to have somebody manage these resources, like we talked about, and this person had to be trustworthy, because these 29 talents that are measured here says there was about 70 pounds. So it equals 70 pounds. So that means that there was something like 2,030 pounds of gold that were used in building this tabernacle. So they had to have trusted people running this. Verse 25, and the silver of them that were numbered of the congregation was 100 talents, and 1,715 shekels, after the shekel of the sanctuary. So from my notes, I wrote that in Exodus 30, in verses 13 through 16, it describes how the Israelites had to give silver as part of a census in counting the nation. And this shows why there was such a high amount of silver that was given. Verse 26, a bekah for every man, that is, half a shekel after the shekel of the sanctuary, for every one that went to be numbered from 20 years old and upward, for 600,000 and 3,550 men. And of the 100 talents of silver were cast the sockets of the sanctuary and the sockets of the veil, and 100 sockets of the 100 talents, a talent for a socket. And of the 1,770 and 5 shekels, he made hooks for the pillars and overlaid their chapiters and filleted them. Verse 29, and the brass of the offering was 70 talents and 2,400 shekels, and wherewith he made the sockets to the door of the tabernacle of the congregation, and the brazen altar, and the brazen grate for it, and all the vessels of the altar, and the sockets of the court round about, and the sockets of the court gate, and all the pins of the tabernacle, and all the pins of the court round about. And that's going to do it for today. We are going to get into chapter 39, and I think 40 is our last one. I'm pretty sure. Let me look here. Yes, that's going to be our last chapter. A lot of you wanted me to get into the New Testament, which is more of a reference for our life. But I don't want to discount Leviticus and Numbers and all of that. Actually, I am in the chapter of Joshua right now. I'm a little bit behind because I've been traveling and doing a lot of different things. And but I'm really enjoying that chapter of Joshua a lot. So I definitely want to continue reading the Old Testament because it's one of my favorite. I just love the stories in there. They're so wonderful, and there's so much to learn, and there's so much to learn about God when we really take the time to hear the stories and understand the people and the things that that I'm showing you here, that I do a little bit of research on, just to know more about what was happening at the time, how they were living, what does this mean for us, how does it relate to us today. So I think those things are important, and it kind of gives us a way to connect with the stories and connect with God in a certain way. So I thank you so much for watching this week. I hope you all have a wonderful week. I'll see you back next week, hopefully for my for the end of Exodus. And remember that if you are still seeking something in your life, you're looking for more, you're reading, you're learning, you're understanding a lot, remember that God loves that you're here. He loves that you're learning, that you want to know more, and he's going to be gracious to you. Just call him into your heart, ask him for repentance of your sin, and call Jesus Christ to come in and cover you with his blood, because that's what he did. He sacrificed for all of us. I want you to understand what that means. There was a person who was holy and pure, and he could heal people. He could heal the sick. He could heal the blind. He could inspire many. This was not some loser. This was a class A person, if you want to say it that way. And you and I, we're terrible sinners. We are supposed to get death. We're not holy. We're not pure. And this person, he gave his life for you and for me. I want you to really understand what that is, what the value of that is. Understand what that really is. Somebody gave their life for you so that you can get close to a holy God and be in eternity forever with that God. So I leave you with that thought for today to contemplate for the rest of the week and really, really feel it in your heart. This is why, if you go back to Exodus, in the beginning of Exodus, this is why one of the reasons for the Passover was that you had to have the lamb living in your family for about a week, because every time you pass by that animal, you realize that animal was going to give its life for you, for your atonement of sins. And it's very easy not to accept Jesus because we don't see him, but this person did give his life for us. So I'm going to leave you with that today, because I think it's something that people really have to think about a lot and contemplate it and get it in your mind. And I think it's important. It's important to not rush through anything, especially a thought like that. Wouldn't it make you want to live your best life because you know that somebody died for you to have the best life? So it's going to take effort on your part. You're going to have to be obedient to God so that you don't get off track anymore and you don't live an impure, unholy life. And that's very important to understand that. So I hope that you all understand that, think about it, and I hope that you have a great week. I'll see you back next week. Have a wonderful week. Bye-bye.